I'm Billy S, welcome to the channel. Today we're ranking the difficulty of Bloodborne's areas based on a poll conducted with my community. I asked my audience to rank each area on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 representing easy and 10 representing hard. Then I tallied the scores, averaged them out, and this is the list we're left with. I also polled my community about each area's quality as well, which is a separate ranking I'll mention alongside each entry. And if you're watching this video as it first airs, I'm currently over on my Twitch channel recording my blind reaction to the Lies of P Overture DLC. If that piques your interest, head on over. Quick side note, and trigger warning, as I am going to talk about a heavy topic for a moment, skip to the timestamp on screen if you just want to watch the video. I made a mention of this on my community tab a few days ago, but in these videos, I allow my voters to leave comments that might make it into the final cut. A majority of them are lovely and often quite helpful in the scripting process for the video. And some voters, they try to be funny, play up the rage a little bit. But some voters have a sense of humor that isn't just ragey or dark, it's just not appropriate. Certain topics are not meant to be punchlines, especially for comments rooted in transphobia, genuine hate speech, or making light of sexual assault. For any kids, teens, or young adults watching who may still be in their edgy phase, shall we say, you're growing up in the internet generation, which means you have so much access to various resources that can explain why some of these topics just shouldn't be joked about. Dark humor is fine, I'm not admonishing that. I'm British, our whole comedy culture is built around self-deprecation and morbidity. But a lot of the voter comments read like a poor imitation script for a Rusty video, with no grasp on why Rusty's rage-filled jokes are able to land. So please can we keep this all in mind when the next community ranking comes about? I would seriously appreciate if we tone down the edginess. Without further ado, my community ranks the Bloodborne areas from easiest to hardest. Let me know if you agree with my viewers down below. At number 19, we have Iosefka's Clinic, which scored a total difficulty average of 2.19 out of 10, with 82 votes for easiest area and a single vote for hardest area. While in the quality ranking, it came in 15th place, with a score of 5.28 out of 10, with no votes for favourite area and 4 votes for least favourite area. Iosefka's Clinic is the starting location of Bloodborne. You awaken in a hospital room, you head down some stairs, and face your first opponent, a werewolf. Likely it'll kill you, sending you to the Hunter's Dream to collect your weapons for a rematch, but you can kill it that first time and escape into nearby Central Yharnam with just your fists to call your own. But it's the return to Iosefka's Clinic after finding a hidden series of ladders in the Forbidden Woods that gives this area some actual difficulty. You've got a brain sucker in the back garden behind a gate that is locked at the start of the game, and once inside, depending on the time of your visit, you'll either have a relaxing stroll past some docile aliens, or a battle with imposter Iosefka in the back stairwell. This is an important area, as you can obtain a 3/3 umbilical cord here, as well as the Cainhurst summons, but as far as the difficulty goes, it's incredibly tame. You can arrive here after the blood moon, meaning Iosefka doesn't attack you, making the entire inner portion of the clinic a safe haven. It's an area that is more interesting for the story behind it, and while you explore Central Yharnam for the first time, it's also a nice place to receive Iosefka's blood vial, a healing item that can only be obtained up to and including entering the cathedral ward. Now before we get to the main voter comment on Iosefka's Clinic, I do want to address one thing. I received criticism of my choice to split certain areas apart in my poll. Some make the case that Iosefka's Clinic and Central Yharnam should be one entry. Same critique goes for the Healing Church Workshop and the Cathedral Ward, as well as the Hypogean Jail and Yahar'gul Unseen Village. But for me, that never made sense. They're all named areas with lower thirds introducing their locations, and sticking them together with the closest areas near them for the sake of giving them a chance on the difficulty ranking just feels like putting makeup on a brick. It's okay to let these areas just exist as easy locations. In fact, it wouldn't even change the outcome of the poll or the placements of those larger areas, I guarantee you that. But if you are one of those people who feels that critique is valid, just skip the entries for those areas, it's not that deep. Anyway, my first voter, if you please. The only reason that keeps Yosefka's clinic from being the easiest area in the game for me is that you can fight Yosefka herself there, if you go back early enough. And damn, those NPCs in Bloodborne are way too hard and tanky. I know that other than her, there's just nothing here, but she killed me more than most bosses, and I wanted to acknowledge that. Hunter fights are definitely some of the toughest in Bloodborne, and Imposter Yosefka happens to wield both of the deadly arcane abilities, Augur of Ebrietas and A Call Beyond, which, if we bitch about when it comes to Micolash, we can also bitch about when it comes to the Imposter. This voter actually believes the next entry in our video to be the easiest in-game, and you could probably swap Yosefka's clinic and number 18 around without much issue, depends on how you feel. At number 18, we have the Lecture Building, which scored a total difficulty average of 3.45 out of 10, with 38 votes for easiest area and 0 votes for hardest area. While in the quality ranking, it came in 17th place, third from last, with a 4.72 out of 10, no votes for favourite area, and 13 votes for least favourite area. The Lecture Building is a 2-story location that you go to twice in-game. The first involves you being picked up by the amygdala to the east of the Grand Cathedral while holding the Tonsil Stone. This warps you to the lower floor where you can chat with Patches, and invade some goopy seminars for a good base game Blood Echo farm, while the upper floor is reached following the defeat of the one reborn in Yahar'gul as you interact with the caged corpse of Micolash. The upper floor does have a dangerous church giant waiting to crush you on the main path, but the regular enemies here are just slime scholars. They can overwhelm the player if you're not careful, but for the most part provide no threat whatsoever. In fact, there's not really a difficult moment to point to in regards to the Lecture Building. As long as you're good at crowd control and you don't mess up against the church giant upstairs, you'll be fine. Though it is worth exploring, as you'll find the Augur of Ebrietas spell in the room to the right of the Slime Scholar Blood Echo farm. And you can also find a small bit of lore in the upper floor that hints at the actions you need to take to achieve the game's true ending. And you can sneak up on Patches, which is just delicious, I must say. Whether you find the host of regular enemies here easier than a beefed up optional Yosefka is what determines which of these two entries is the easiest location in game, but this is what my viewers decided. Speaking of which, we do have a voter comment. Why does the Lecture Building even exist? It only connects the nightmare areas together and has the most boring enemies ever conceived, the Slug Students. At least it's short, but that adds to the thought that it just exists for lore reasons. There is that one church giant who has mastered the art of the Flaming Fist, who I guess is the lecturer, he's cool, and that's it. It's so dull that I even forgot its name while writing this comment. Honestly, you make an interesting point. The Lecture Building is one of the few mysteries of Bloodborne that doesn't actually have a concrete answer. We don't know why it exists, and I can't find any theories beyond it being another part of Byrgenwerth that was drawn into the nightmare. Why does it connect to the Nightmare Frontier and the Nightmare of Mensis? No clue, but I think there is a place for lore-specific zones in FromSoft titles. This video may be a difficulty ranking, but that's not all these games are. It's just a shame that this area also kind of fails as an actual area of interest by being boring as fuck, but that's besides the point. At number 17, we have the Healing Church Workshop, which scored a total difficulty average of 3.68 out of 10, with 16 votes for easiest area and no votes for hardest area. While in the quality rankings, it sits in 16th place, just above the Lecture Building, with a 5.18 out of 10, 0 votes for favourite area, and 4 votes for least favourite area. The Healing Church Workshop is unlocked after beating Old Yharnam. The door in the right of the Cathedral Ward hub opens up, allowing you to reach this hidden tower. And this area, despite being relatively short, is actually quite memorable to me. You're greeted by a man in a wheelchair with a Gatling gun, which is just iconic behaviour. Ascending the tower is fun because you kill more old men in wheelchairs, plus the room leading to Upper Cathedral Ward has so many pots you can roll through and smash. That's satisfying right there. I've died a few times here because there's always one extra enemy you don't notice on each floor, leading to a rifle shot to the face, or you just accidentally roll off the edge of a balcony. While the city streets below are these dark alleys where you can find townsfolk, a snatcher enemy, and one of the game's first brain suckers. Something about this area feels more oppressive than any part of Central Yharnam or Cathedral Ward, which I really love the energy of. But the real difficulty of the Healing Church Workshop is the gravity section, where you drop down the tower to the bottom via various wooden planks. That alone is tough but doable. If you're trying to reach the hidden door leading to the abandoned Hunter's Workshop though, you're in for a rough time. We've likely seen more people die to gravity here than anything else in the game, and at the very bottom you have an enemy unique to the Chalice dungeons, a beast-possessed soul, which is a real treat if you don't immediately backstab him for an easy kill. No voter comments, which kinda surprises me, because I thought at least one person would talk about defying gravity to reach the abandoned workshop. But hey, that's why I brought it up myself. I am a consummate professional. At number 16, we have the Hunter's Dream, which scored a total difficulty average of 4.44 out of 10, with 11 votes for easiest area and 1 vote for hardest area, while in the quality rankings it lands in 7th place, with a 7.55 out of 10, with 4 votes for favourite area, and is the only area on today's ranking to receive no votes for least favourite area. Iconic behaviour. Now, to preface this, I allowed my voters to consider the Gehrman and Moon Presence fights when ranking the Hunter's Dream, as it is the only way to give this entry something to actually talk about. The one downside to including hubs in the difficulty rankings, you know. Usually, I don't even consider boss fights in regards to area rankings, as I want the focus to be on the areas themselves, but I didn't want a repeat of the Demon Souls ranking where the Nexus was just last by default, so this was a nice workaround. And having Gehrman as the main difficulty spike here definitely justifies this location being above the other 3. He's one of the tougher fights in the game, is super fast and hard-hitting, and will parry you if he feels like it. By comparison, the Moon Presence knocks the difficulty down a peg by introducing one of the easiest fights in the game as the true final boss. There is no threat to the Moon Presence beyond his singular wipe out all your health and force you to rally it back mechanic, and that's just not enough to justify a high ranking. Outside of that, the Hunter's Dream is just a really pleasant hub area, very relaxing, nice flowers, a lovely level up maiden in the form of the doll, we get a toasty workshop to do our upgrades in, it's wonderful. We have one voter comment, and of course, it's about the glory of this hub. When reflecting on it, the Hunter's Dream is a vertical slice of everything I love about Bloodborne. The Hunter's Dream and Moonlight Melody are such somber yet comforting tracks that speak to a deep part of my soul. They sing to me in a way that makes it feel like I am truly safe. But it's the atmosphere that truly makes the Hunter's Dream so striking. The hazy fog that litters the space, the impossible sky with the very FromSoft-esque tree pillars, and the large glowing moon that hangs low. Finding the abandoned old workshop, which I assume is combined with this area since I don't see it in the ranking, in the waking world with its very own doll, lifeless and unmoving, had me spinning my mind on what was real and what wasn't as I pieced together the narrative and lore of Bloodborne. And of course, one can't forget the final confrontation with Gehrman that plays in that breathtaking field as that gorgeous track hits in the background and the workshop burns. All of these elements come together to make the Hunter's Dream my favourite hub area in the series. The abandoned old workshop was included in the previous entry as it's attached to the Healing Church Workshop, but you pretty much explained why I adore the Hunter's Dream so much. I did personally rank the hub levels last year, but I'm thinking of redoing the list as a community ranking, especially now that we have a new hub in Elden Ring Night Rain's variant of the Round Table. Let me know if that interests you guys, I'd be curious to know. At number 15, we have Hemwick Charnel Lane, which scored a total average of 4.47 out of 10, with 6 votes for easiest area and no votes for hardest area. While in the quality rankings, it landed in 13th place with a 6 out of 10, no votes for favourite area and 7 votes for least favourite, which breaks my heart, because I truly feel Hemwick is the most underrated area in Bloodborne. None of the enemies here are particularly difficult on their own, but as part of a group, they can be very deadly. The Hemwick Grave Women make up the majority of the enemies around here and are able to swarm the player with their numbers really quickly. Dogs are often placed in sneaky locations to get you to drop your guard, only for a stray firebomb or rifle shot to hit you when your back is turned. And towards the end of the area, you have the Executioner enemies who are stronger, deadlier versions of the trolls in Central Yharnam. Their axes are sharp, but they're just as susceptible to parrying. If your insight is high, you'll also have to deal with a host of mad ones spawning throughout the lane, trying to ambush you on sight, especially in that opening forest that leads to the area lamp, where it's a mix of mad ones, dogs, and riflemen who hit surprisingly hard. But because none of the enemies here are tanky and the area boss is the Witches of Hemwick, I think Charnel Lane has this energy of being easier than it actually is. In reality, it's a really well-designed zone with clever shortcuts and a cool sense of progression as you try to unlock the gate connecting both halves of the area. The theming as well is on point. It truly is a charnel house, with corpses and gravestones littering the streets, a place where the bodies are picked apart and the desired bits are sold to the school of Mensis in Yahar'gul. As for my voters, it seems I'm not the only one who thinks this area is slept on. Hemwick Charnel Lane always gets a ton of hate. It's incredibly linear, but the world building and the atmosphere just does it for me. Those crazy women dancing by the fires, the dilapidation, the pure madness of it all, it's excellent and wonderfully shows the insanity that descended upon the neighborhood. One of the great things about Bloodborne is that many areas show how the madness affected them differently. Cainhurst has the vampires, Central Yharnam has the would-be hunters, the woods have the snake beasts. Hemwick is like a classic New England horror tale where the fears became real and the witches destroyed and corrupted everyone. So much fun. It may not be witches in the fantastical sense, but it kind of reminds me of a Wicker Man or Midsummer situation, seeing how they've taken complete control of this lane from the rest of the residents. There's just something very thematically strong here, and I fully believe if we had a better boss at the end, people might be singing a different tune about Hemwick. At number 14, we have Byrgenwerth, which scored a total difficulty average of 4.59 out of 10, with 7 votes for easiest area and no votes for hardest area. While on the quality scale, it came second to last, 18th place, with a score of 4.63 out of 10, with 1 vote for favourite area and 17 votes for least favourite. I'm actually shocked to see Byrgenwerth above Hemwick Charnel Lane, an area that is a fraction of the size, with a small handful of enemies. Is it this high because of the Brainsucker or the Garden of Eyes enemies? No. Is it because of the fluorescent flower that's usually found in the Chalice dungeons and its ranged projectiles? No. Is it because Byrgenwerth has a tough level layout? Not in the slightest. That shit is so linear it would make a ruler blush. No, it's ranked this high because of Uriel, the Last Scholar, the hunter who lurks indoors with the threaded cane and the Rosmarinus, who will ensure that you suffer needless defeats. She's a wall to overcome, and if you're not good at parrying or you don't have a weapon that can break her poise, you're gonna have a tough time. It took me multiple playthroughs to find comfortable ways to deal with her, but you give her an inch and she will take a mile. There's nothing else in Byrgenwerth that can convince me it deserves to be this high. Maybe a voter has something to say? What's to be said about the disappointment of Byrgenwerth that's not been said in the past? The biggest blemish on this game, aside from some QOL elements, is that Byrgenwerth is one of the most important areas in the game, and it's an area we spend 20 minutes in and then never return to. If any one area of Bloodborne could be reworked, I'd make Byrgenwerth a proper level resembling the concept art. Raya Lucaria proved that exploring a massive academy in Souls game was a genius concept, and having a massive dilapidated university shrouded deep in the woods being the first real section of the game, diving deep into the cosmic horrors of Yharnam, would have been so damn cool. I'm with you here. There was so much potential for Byrgenwerth to be this vast university where when you enter it's fairly normal, only for it to devolve into cosmic horror leading up to the Rom boss fight, and they just never got the chance to make this vision a reality. It's such a missed opportunity and could have made the area more difficult and more fun. I can't help but sigh every time I reach the lamp immediately following the Shadows of Yharnam boss fight, and dread the annoyingly awful enemies and boss that awaits. The bug dudes that try hopping on your head non-stop and inflict frenzy, the brain suckers with the most BS grab attack in the game, the centipede that I don't even bother fighting because they're tanky and I can't get their moveset down, skill issue I know but still. Not even gonna mention Yurie and her Call Beyond spell because I have died and have had to run back to her more times than I'd like to admit. Yeah, okay, so it's Yurie. She's the reason we're here in 14th right now. At number 13, we have Central Yharnam, which scored a total average of 5.28 out of 10, with 4 votes for easiest area and 5 votes for hardest area, while in the quality rankings, Central Yharnam is your first place, with a massive 9.21 out of 10, with 48 votes for favourite area and just 1 single vote for least favourite. Bloodborne's opening level, Central Yharnam, is sitting at a perfect middle spot, despite skewing to the lower end of today's list, and that is exactly where it needs to be. This is arguably FromSoftware's hardest opening level in the Soulsborne games, featuring a vast interconnected series of city streets, sewers, and bridges. There's always something new to discover in Central Yharnam, whether it's a burning mob who have taken to attacking anything that moves, a pair of werewolves who have made the highest bridge their home, a sewer path filled with beasts and a giant pig, a darkened house containing a surprise man in a wheelchair, or the lower bridge to the Tomb of Erden where you dodge a flaming ball and various Yharnamites. There are weapons to find, armor sets to uncover, and it all snakes back to the opening lamp atop a ladder where all shortcuts lead. Once you open that gate from the Dark House, you are golden, with access to every elevator and pathway to each bit of the city. The game perfectly teaches you how to play by forcing you into a trial by fire, overwhelming you with regular enemies so you realize that aggression and crowd control is key, while keeping the tougher mobs behind closed doors. The trolls teach you how to parry for easy blood vials, the werewolves teach you to search for alternative paths if the enemies are too tough. There are 2 different distinct bosses, a beast and a hunter, giving you the flavor of both elements of Bloodborne's combat. It is fantastic. A perfect level of challenge for a tutorial zone that doesn't hold your hand, especially as you can't level up until you either reach a boss or acquire Madman's knowledge, which allows you to focus less on building up blood echoes and more on just exploring the city. I can guarantee our voters have a ton to say on Central Yharnam, but I'm limiting it to 2 comments. Let's hear from number 1. Central Yharnam is another example of FromSoft kicking off their game with their best foot forward. It's debatably the best area in the game for me, as it takes a massive sprawling space and interweaves its layers on top of itself, using verticality to transform what would be a linear path into one that felt completely labyrinthine on my first playthrough. So many of Central Yharnam's set pieces have stayed with me in my mind, from the cry of the cleric beast when climbing the ladder, to being yelled at by the enemies that I was attacking, to meeting the languid Gilbert or the elusive Eileen, all ending in that chilling introductory cinematic against Father Gascoigne. It's simply FromSoft at their best, and it deserves the praise it gets. The use of verticality is something I didn't touch upon, but it is something Bloodborne does extremely well. Every level is on some layer of verticality in the world, similar to Dark Souls 1, with the Cathedral Ward, the home of the Healing Church, towering over everything, and the rest of the areas descend downwards. Central Yharnam, then Old Yharnam in the hamlet below, with Yahar'gul hidden out of sight. The Forbidden Woods goes deeper still until we reach Byrgenwerth at a faraway lake, And yet Central Yharnam itself is this microcosm of Bloodborne's verticality with the upper bridges, the middling streets, and the lower sewers. It's an impressive level design that hasn't been matched in the same way since, though Elden Ring does come pretty close. But the level design is fine, what about the difficulty? Voter 2? Man, that first foray through Central Yharnam was brutal. A bit too brutal, honestly. Bloodborne kind of throws you to the sharks and expects you to both live and thrive, and that would have been fine if the game had a proper tutorial and not the confusing and, at the moment, unactionable information overload that is the floor messages in the Hunter's Dream. While I personally did manage to both live and thrive, even to the point that the game's difficulty plummeted rather drastically afterwards, I wouldn't be surprised if many gave up and or rage quit before they even reached either Cleric Beast or Gascoigne. Honestly, that brutality, to me, seems developer intended. Bloodborne was a completely different game to Demon's Souls, Dark Souls, or Dark Souls 2, and Miyazaki knew the best way to help players learn a system that's the antithesis of what they played before was to throw them to the wolves. Do I think the tutorials could have been better? Of course. I don't think FromSoftware have ever made a brilliant tutorial per se, with the exception of Dark Souls, but I do think that the difficulty here was needed to really sell Bloodborne as a different experience. And if you're going with a throw to the wolves mentality, but still considering Central Yharnam a tutorial, I think it's a really good tutorial level, for example. Every Souls game has people rage quit before the first boss anyway, even the ones we feel are easy. So with that in mind, I'm not as concerned with the idea of people dropping Bloodborne in Central Yharnam, because it's gonna happen regardless of the Soulsborne game. At number 12, we have Cathedral Ward, which scored a total difficulty average of 5.41 out of 10, with 3 votes for easiest area and no votes for hardest area, while in the quality scale it lands in 6th place, with a score of 7.81 out of 10, with 9 votes for favourite area and 1 vote for least favourite. Cathedral Ward is just as beloved as Central Yharnam for a lot of players, continuing that same level of interconnectivity while making the general enemy selection a little harder to deal with. Now you get Church Giants and Church Guards, some of which gain extra moves with higher insight to make them more dangerous. How about the Brainsucker hidden on the path to the Forbidden Woods door, or the Riflemen who stalk the streets near Ariana's house? To the right of the Grand Cathedral, we have a large path with executioners and a couple of regular hunters to fight through too. And later in the game, Cathedral Ward is home to the hardest hunter fight, the Bloody Crow of Canehurst, who could practically raise the difficulty of this zone by multiple points if we really wanted him to. After Old Yharnam, snatches get added into the pool as well, which can be uber brutal right out of the gate, and yet none of these enemies feel too overwhelming in the long run. I also just love that Cathedral Ward is connected to everything. Central Yharnam, Hemwick, Forbidden Woods, Yahar'gul, Hunter's Nightmare, the Healing Church Workshop, and Upper Cathedral Ward. The Lecture Building, Nightmare Frontier, it's actually insane how much you have to go through this zone, to the point where it becomes the de facto safe hub of the game where you send most of your survivors. Not to mention the gorgeous architecture with its gothic stylings and the twinge of Lovecraft as you gain more insight and see things that perhaps should have lain hidden. Hardest area in the game? Absolutely not, but it is one of the most important, and that sticks with players, given it placed 6th in the quality rankings, even if we only got 1 voter comment. I love Cathedral Ward as a sort of hub area, connecting to most of the main areas of the game, but also being beautifully designed, interconnected, and filled with interesting NPCs. Those NPCs at the zone just before Yahar'gul that howl in frenzy and at one point just stop responding were a memorable detail in my playthrough. You're the first person to bring up those NPCs near the 2 hunters that just howl. I love that every interaction in Bloodborne has someone who remembers it fondly. This is real proof of just how impactful the game really is, and why we need a PC port and a 60 FPS remake, Sony! At number 11, we have the Hypogean Jail, which scored a total difficulty average of 5.9 out of 10, with no votes for easiest area and 1 vote for hardest area. As for quality, it lands in 12th place with a 6.01 out of 10, with 1 vote for favourite area and 3 votes for least favourite area. This is the pre-Blood Moon version of Yahar'gul, featuring a much simpler enemy set with snatchers abound, large pigs waiting to charge you in the daylight, and a few sneaky witches of Hemwick hiding behind closed doors. That little jump scare when you head down the stairs and one runs past the upcoming doorway is still one of the scariest moments in the series for me. You can only get here by being killed by a Snatcher enemy, causing a special cutscene as you get dragged into the cell and left behind. But by the time you've arrived, the Mensis ritual has already begun behind closed doors, and all you can hear are the distant, eerie chants, with no clue as to what their purpose truly is. Being trapped in an unfamiliar area with the only way out being a lantern you have to find for yourself is terrifying, and while it ultimately ends up being quite easy to find said lantern, you can't shake the feeling that things are really off. It's atmospheric ambiance at its finest. Exploring this area isn't too tough due to the simpler nature of the enemies around, but there are enough in the streets that you have to play carefully lest you get mauled by dogs or a surprise pig you didn't see coming. And the Snatchers, which have already proven they can kill you quite easily, infest the halls. It's good practice against them and their ability to buff mid-fight, but I could see a lot of players getting caught in a feedback loop of trying and failing to kill them. No voter comments for the Hypogean jail this time. Places like Upper Cathedral Ward tend to steal the atmospheric spotlight, while leaving the jail with way less wiggle room with the voters, which is a shame because I really wanted someone to bring up the chanting and the music that constantly accompanies you as you explore. It's so creepy. But I think we can all agree that we won't forget our first time being dragged here. At number 10, we have Old Yharnam, which scored a total difficulty average of 6.18 out of 10, with 1 vote for easiest area and 1 vote for hardest area. On the quality scale, it came in 9th place, scoring a solid 6.71 out of 10, with 1 vote for favourite area and 1 vote for least favourite area. Old Yharnam is a fun location, split into 2 distinct halves, the upper rooftops and the lower streets, and one of these halves is much tougher than the other, because one of them has a man with a Gatling gun. Jura greets you as you enter Old Yharnam, asking you to turn back and leave the beasts here alone. Should you ignore his warnings, he opens fire on you with a hail of bullets. You have to duck and weave through the various buildings until you reach a ladder that leads to his rooftop, and even then, you have to fight the guy if you decide to aggro him early, though it is possible to become his friend should you enter Old Yharnam via Dark Beast Parl's arena at the Hypogean jail. His gunfire means you don't have a lot of time to process the enemies around you. Poison beasts cloaked in rags who will inflict you with their status effect if you're not careful. There's a tough hunter in the courtyard near a shortcut to the lower streets who often forces you to fight within Jura's gun range, which isn't fun. And they really amp up the enemy amount here, with larger groups attempting to swarm the player, even if individually they're not that strong. The challenge here comes from how the first shortcut of the level is around 75% of the way through. You have to overcome a lot, including the rooftops and this room with a horrifying effigy to make it there. But the lower streets provide a much easier experience. There are a handful of werewolves lurking about, but you should be more equipped to fight them, and one even opens up a path leading to a doorway that connects to the rooftops near the area lamp. Once that's open, it's a quick path to the boss with nary a threat in between. Old Yharnam leaves a hell of an impression with Jura and that lengthy first half, which leads me to feel that Old Yharnam is the toughest early game area you explore, and one voter agrees with me. Old Yharnam probably gave me the most deaths during my first ever playthrough of Bloodborne. That's not to say I think it's the hardest. Late game areas like the Unseen Village and the Fishing Hamlet are clearly much tougher, but Old Yharnam challenged me in a very personal way. I like to get the most out of these games, to do absolutely everything, so I explored Old Yharnam's first half in its entirety, without ever thinking to go and kill Jura first. Seriously though, the basic mobs in Old Yharnam can kill you very fast in the early game. Combine them, Jura, and that jerk hunter just below Jura's building, and I think Old Yharnam makes a pretty good case for being the toughest early game area. And let's be real, this is likely the experience most of us had our first time playing. In unfamiliar territory with a gun bearing down on us and no way to know if we can even stop it, Old Yharnam is smack bang in the middle of today's list, and it represents the turning point as the rest of the areas we're visiting really up the ante. At number 9, we have Forsaken Castle Cainhurst, which scored a total difficulty average of 6.51 out of 10, with 1 vote for easiest area and 1 vote for hardest area. While on the quality scale, it comes in 4th place with an 8.2 out of 10, with 25 votes for favourite area and just 2 votes for least favourite. Forsaken Castle Cainhurst is a fan favourite, a real change of pace for Bloodborne as we abandon the beastly scourge of the early game and the cosmic horrors of the late game. Fuck Lovecraft, let's go into the throes of gothic vampirism. Outside, the castle is overrun by bloodlickers, these horrifying bloated mosquito-looking asses who scrabble along the rocks. They have a great aim, able to fire blood at the player from afar, or just jump on you if you're not careful. And if you go down into the lower chasm, you'll also find a host of worms ready to rip apart your health bar. Indoors, we're faced with a completely different enemy type, phantoms and ghosts of the former residents of the castle. They were all purged by the Executioner group helmed by Logarius, and we're just picking up the pieces. But somehow, despite aliens and werewolves, it's the ghosts that feel the most eerie and out of place in Bloodborne's world. I love this inclusion. The path through Cainhurst is fairly linear to start out with, working through various grand halls and castle battlements to make your way to the Grand Library. You'll come across gargoyles who try to blend in with the various statues because it's not a FromSoft game without them. And when you reach the Grand Library, that's where the difficulty sets in, as not only are there more ghosts for you to worry about, but you also have the servants who can snipe you from afar with blow darts or attack you with their rapiers. You have to parkour along windowsills to actually reach a lever to open the path to the rooftops, all the while avoiding a new ghostly enemy type, as some of them now hold their heads in their hands, and if the lady's head screams, it can stun the player in place. Combined with the Cainhurst servants who can inflict a special rune on the player with their darts that draws the ghosts to them while upping the damage you take, and yeah, I've died a few times here. At least the rooftop jog to the boss is pretty easy, if a little nerve-wracking, because dealing with gravity and thin walkways is always a heart-pumping moment in Soulsborne. But ultimately, for the point in the game where you reach Cainhurst, things are fine. You should have a strong weapon and a good sense of gameplay. It's not a fan-favourite level for difficulty, it's a fan-favourite for... well, I'll let the voter explain. I'm going to be the representative of Cainhurst and the Vilebloods for a moment and yap about Forsaken Castle Cainhurst. It is, by far, my favourite area in the game in terms of design. This area is obviously deeply inspired by Bram Stoker's Dracula, and it shows. The castle is only lit up by moonlight, the ornate halls decorated with crimson colours. Oh my, it just piques my vampire interest. The only thing holding it back is the enemy variety. The ghost women and gargoyles are amazing, plus the fencing women are a plus, but like, where are the hard as fuck infamous Cainhurst knights? We see them in the Chalice dungeons, so it would have been cool to see them in the actual castle. Martyr L is a great boss, but I feel like having an extra boss somewhere there would make it the best area in the game. I think part of why we don't get the Cainhurst Knights in Castle Cainhurst is because of Martyr Logarius. The Executioners stormed the castle in the past, wiping out the entire Vileblood lineage, which is why, when you encounter Queen Annalise, she explains when you join her covenant that you are the only 2 Vilebloods left in Yharnam. To add the Cainhurst Knights, you would have to completely alter that aspect of the story, which changes both Queen Annalise's story and Alfred and Logarius's. It would have made the area more interesting to explore, but I also don't fully agree with the concept of Cainhurst needing a second optional boss, as it's already an extra area with Martyr Logarius being a hidden boss for the base game. But hey, to each their own. Castle Cainhurst is a scary place when I first found it. It gave me the creeps because I didn't know what to expect, but that feeling that you're being watched and suddenly the ghost ladies appear, it gave me the chills. The lore of the Vilebloods and the Executioners is very interesting, and the battle with Martyr Logarius was intimidating but exciting. Just watching that corpse rise is amazing. But the moment that you put on the crown and see a missing part of the castle appear and find Queen Annalise, it's priceless. The castle itself, it's simple and has little puzzles and secrets to find, but the rest is not that complicated and it's very enjoyable. Most of the voter comments echo these sentiments, Cainhurst being a real breath of fresh air, even if it never quite veers into overly difficult territory. There's a reason why it's a good place to visit as early as possible for some quick late game materials. At number 8, we have the Forbidden Woods, which scored a total difficulty average of 6.74 out of 10, with no votes for easiest area and 8 votes for hardest area. While on the quality scale, it lands at a very low 14th place with a score of 5.67, with 2 votes for favourite area and 25 votes for least favourite area. The Forbidden Woods have always been a divisive area in this fanbase due to the sprawling length that is split into 2 very large, very distinct zones, and because it's incredibly easy to lose yourself among the trees and the graves. The first half is very Resident Evil 4, featuring an outcast village that you have to invade and pass through on your way to Bergenworth. I love how the villagers have all sorts of traps here to make your passage as difficult as possible. From pitfalls in the central plaza, to rivers made of oil that will burn you to a crisp if a fire pot is thrown your way, to a massive cannon that is a little more intimidating than it actually ends up being, and of course who can forget the swinging log right by the lamp which swings twice before the rope snaps, sending it flying across the path like a Tom and Jerry skit. I really think this part of the map is insanely well designed, even including side paths like the dog cages that lead to the hidden poison cave that connects with Yosefka's clinic. And then there's the windmill and the build-up to the snake-infested villages of the lower half of the forest, which is just perfection. It's only when you enter the second half, where snake balls, aliens, and giant pigs reign supreme, that the level really starts to lose some of its luster. Everything begins to look very similar, causing you to get turned around, which, even for someone like me with good navigation skills, can be brutal to deal with. Then imagine players who need a GPS to find their way around their house, and you can imagine the frustration. It also doesn't help that the constant series of snakes have extremely long-range attacks that make it difficult to get in close and consistently melee. There are multiple shortcuts that also feel counterintuitive to use, like this elevator that I refuse to believe anyone has hopped onto. And while I love them, the area does end with a gank fight against the Shadows of Yharnam, and if I know my Soulsborne fanbase, it's that any area ending in a gank fight that isn't called Anor Londo is downvoted to high heaven. Did I miss anything, voters? Controversially, I hate the Forbidden Woods. I do really appreciate that they form a solid transition from the beast areas to the kin areas, with snakes being a good halfway between the two, and the first half isn't bad, but that place is so long, so visually dull, and such a maze, and I find the snake enemies so uninteresting to fight. I also think the Shadows of Yharnam are literally the only boss in the game that has never killed me, so I'm always just in such a rush to get the Forbidden Woods over with. As bad as the nightmare areas can be, at least they have some variety. I feel like the main mechanic in the Forbidden Woods is just the player getting lost. I mainly wanted to highlight this comment because I've never seen Forbidden Woods hate be classified as controversial before. It's the other way around. You are not alone. A lot of my viewers feel the same way. I'm the minority here as a Forbidden Woods lover, but I accepted that fate many moons ago. The Forbidden Woods is an interesting area of difficulty for me. I don't find the enemies or their configurations that hard as a whole, though the large snake balls always give me a hard time. No, it's the overall layout that makes it harder for me. It's a much more open area than anywhere else in the game, and I remember perpetually getting lost in the Forbidden Woods on my first playthrough. Everything looks the same after a while, more so in the first half of the area, but still, and I still have moments where I get lost on repeat playthroughs. I suppose that's the point of the area, but it just makes it a lot harder to get through than the enemy's difficulty would suggest. I wanted to highlight your comment, voter, because you correctly point out that the Forbidden Woods is an area that can still feel difficult even at points where the enemies aren't. Difficulty isn't just about whether you fight something tough, it can be about navigation or level design as well, which is what I wanted to highlight with this series, and your comment really sums that mentality up, so thanks so much. At number 7, we have Upper Cathedral Ward, which scored a total difficulty average of 6.82 out of 10, with no votes for easiest area and 5 votes for hardest area, while quality-wise it lands in 8th place with a score of 6.87 out of 10, with 4 votes for favourite area and 9 votes for least favourite area. Now, I have to admit that this placement surprised me, but I think I understand why Upper Cathedral Ward has beaten out areas like the Forbidden Woods and Castle Canehurst. Quite simply, it's the enemy variety, because as far as the level itself goes, it's an incredibly linear experience from start to finish, with one large orphanage to explore with a few side paths as you look for the exit key. There's a second floor you reach via a ladder, but there's not much to it. Clearly, the difficulty comes in the form of the main enemy types, the giant werewolves and the brain suckers. The werewolves show up as you enter the main room, knocking down the chandelier and plunging us into darkness, where you can barely see them except by the light of their ferocious eyes. Many players have gotten killed here trying to fight them head on, which is why I always like to run back to the doorway of the room and chill there. The enemies can't get through, allowing me to cheese them with a funneling strategy. Though they do get their revenge with that one werewolf that jumps through the window at the end of the hallway, which you have to fight normally. More annoyingly though, we have brain suckers who populate the halls more than anywhere else in the game. Do you like getting snared with magic and unable to move as someone sucks your brains out? Do you like that happening multiple times in quick succession because you accidentally aggroed 2 of them at once? It can be very frustrating and very difficult to regain your composure after getting grabbed, leading to more slip-ups and wasted blood vials courtesy of repeat chain grabs. Luckily, the brain suckers patrol very distinct routes, allowing you to sneak up on quite a few of them, but that doesn't change how frustrating the enemy type can be en masse. There's no other justification for Upper Cathedral Ward being this high, given we're not taking bosses into account, so shall we see if I'm right, voters? My least favourite area is Upper Cathedral Ward. While the atmosphere is great, the brainsucker enemies just ruin it for me. I find them to be inherently some of the most annoying enemies in the game, a status made worse by their ability to remove your insight. The Upper Cathedral Ward is filled to the brim with them, and the tight hallways mean their immobilization and grab attacks are even more dangerous. It just ruins the entire level for me, and if it weren't for Ebrietas, I would ignore this area on every playthrough. Exactly what I thought. Brainsuckers have the capacity to really bolster an area's placement in a Bloodborne ranking, and many of my commenters echoed this sentiment. But while that voter finds Upper Cathedral Ward to be their least favourite area, this voter finds it to be their favourite. Gameplay-wise, it's not as intricate as Central Yharnam, for example, but as a big horror fan, I love the vibes of the Upper Ward. It's one of 2, not counting the Dream, areas in the game that has music playing outside of boss fights, which immediately adds to the atmosphere. Then there's the entrance. The second you step onto that foggy bridge with the solitary tree and the purple sky before the aforementioned music even starts, it sets the tone perfectly. Then there's the constant noises from the brainsuckers that are creepy as hell, and that's not even mentioning the chandelier. The lore surrounding the place makes it even more unnerving. Bloodborne is excellent at vibes. I don't know how to do bold writing for this, but that's what I wanted to do here, in general. But Upper Cathedral Ward takes it to another level. If you're a fan of survival horror or sheer atmosphere, then yes, Upper Cathedral Ward is going to speak to you like it did with this voter here. The brainsuckers may be difficult to fight, but the noises they make add a really strong level of environmental ambiance that leads to a series of memorable encounters and exploration. At number 6, we have the Nightmare Frontier, which scored a total average of 6.88 out of 10, with 0 votes for easiest area and 2 votes for hardest area. While in the quality rankings, it came dead last, 19th place, with a score of 4.3 out of 10, with 0 votes for favourite area and 50 votes for least favourite. And that 4.3 is pretty generous, might I add. The Nightmare Frontier is the designated PvP area for Bloodborne, as well as its poison swamp. Now, admittedly, the poison is the least of the area's problems, and I would argue that I don't particularly mind the status effect all that much. Would have loved an item to negate the sluggish movement, though. My problems with this area, especially in regards to difficulty, comes from some painful enemy placement and environmental design that doesn't agree with me whatsoever. The Loran Silverbeasts are the main enemy type here, which I actually quite like. They're underutilized in Bloodborne's main game, being featured more in the Chalice dungeons, but here they pose a genuine threat. On top of that, we have rock-throwing trolls who populate the poison swamp and the cliffs around the area. These are annoying enemies who have the ability to one-shot you without you even realizing they're there. In a zone that already feels a little confusing to navigate due to the samey terrain, being forced to do all of that again because you got bonked once by a rock you didn't see is seriously irritating. And going back to the poison swamp, you're very likely to get hit by the rocks these guys throw because you move so much slower than normal in the poison, making you an easy target. Yay! This zone is just so bland and desaturated too. I'm not sure what I'm looking at half the time. Then you stumble into some hunter enemies and the god-awful terrain becomes an actual hindrance. You want to dodge backwards? Better hope there's not a small headstone waiting to block you. Want to attack this enemy? Better hope your weapon doesn't bonk on shitty level geometry. If you're online, you might even get invaded. I've never seen a more awful invasion location than here. Who would want to fight an actual other human player in this shit? And God forbid you find the Winter Lanterns in the latter part of the level. I don't hate those enemy types as much as the rest of the fanbase, but even I'm like, you're putting a madness-inducing enemy on the main path? After getting through a pretty lengthy swamp sequence? It's shady, to say the least, and I don't fault anyone who died to that Winter Lantern for just refusing to come back to this area, or learning the elevator shortcut skip to avoid the zone altogether. Now, I don't think my vote is held back, but there was one who really stood out with their Nightmare Frontier critique, and they are who I'm featuring today. I might be the only person alive who does not feel any sort of disdain for FromSoft's predisposition to putting poison swamps in their games. Valley of Defilement, Blighttown, Farron Keep, I find enjoyment in those areas. The Nightmare Frontier? Now that's the exception. I fucking hate this location with a passion of 1,000 burning suns. It's the only poison swamp where I struggle to find any respite from the annoyances within it. There is no item to negate the nerfed movement like the Rusted Iron Ring from Dark Souls 1, there is no weapon skill that makes traversal a non-issue like in Dark Souls 3, and there are few if any small little patches of land within the swamp to wait out the poison buildup or better deal with the enemies like in all the other games. If there are any islands like this, I couldn't find them because these stone protrusions placed haphazardly stopped me consistently from being able to get out of the swamp, and just made traversal significantly more annoying and awkward. And when you finally make it to the end of the poison swamp, you're greeted with your likely first introduction to Winter Lanterns, and proper introduction to the Frenzy status effect, which will most likely kill you as it did me, forcing you to do all that over again. Add in the area being bereft of any color to the point where I literally get a headache just from looking at it, and there is no real question on what the worst area in Bloodborne is for me. Fuck the Nightmare Frontier. Valid point there, my man. This likely is a player's first intro to the Winter Lanterns, so throwing in Frenzy all of a sudden is bound to cause a lot of chaos, with people not knowing what it is or how to negate it on a first playthrough. It feels extremely unfair to deal with in a way that isn't enjoyable at all. And the rest of the critique lines up with everything everyone is saying. The only plus, the only thing the Nightmare Frontier gets right, we get the iconic Patches Push of Death. Try not to say Mother Challenge, difficulty impossible. At number 5, we have the Research Hall, which scored a total difficulty average of 7.32 out of 10, with no votes for easiest area and 14 votes for hardest area. While on the quality scale, it's the same, 5th place again, with a 7.98 out of 10 instead. There are 24 votes for favourite area, and 6 votes for least favourite. The Research Hall is one of FromSoft's best vertical levels, as you have to ascend through this fucked up medical center if you want to reach Lady Maria. The central staircases will take you up some of the floors, but most of your progression will be in side rooms where you're killing patients and opening elevator shortcuts to make life easier. The enemies here hit hard, with even the basic patients having combo strings that can decimate your health bar rapidly. Then you have the more dangerous giant patients, which wield their IV stands like clubs, and god, they mess me up every time. As you get higher and higher, you also have to deal with a Gatling gun wheelchair man who has killed most of us at least once. It takes some timing to know when to run past him, and even then there's a little luck involved. Before finally reaching the rafters, killing some rats, and shifting the central staircase so you can reach the boss door, which also leaves you in range of a brutal hunter who I certainly struggled against on my recorded run. And if you want something juicy and optional, go to the Lumenflower Garden. Everything there wants to kill you, and some of the enemies know magic, which makes any attempt I take to go there into a suicide run, grabbing the items and sacrificing my poor blood echoes to the gods themselves. The main difficulty of this level is navigation, and figuring out which paths you haven't taken, while avoiding a host of hard-hitting DLC enemies. Even for the endgame, they feel really difficult, and while I'm, again, not the biggest fan of the basic enemies being able to frantically maul you to death with swipes, I respect it. As for the voters, there's a lot of nuance to their takes actually. While the research hall is not my least favourite area, that would be the Nightmare Frontier, I'm not very fond of it overall, for really one reason. The godforsaken patients. They are so miserable to fight. Maybe if they didn't throw about 10 billion of them at you in the first part of the area, I wouldn't hate them so much, but that first room, followed up with the giant patient at the top of the ladder, soured me to them forever. They attack really quickly and hit stupidly hard, and since there's so many of them, you can very easily find yourself overwhelmed in mere moments. And I think it's a massive shame, because the area itself, I think, is incredibly well designed. The vertical nature of it with the various hidden rooms is really cool, and how it evolves as you explore it, not just by opening shortcuts, but by turning the crank at the top, allowing you to explore the place in a completely new way. Ultimately, this is a very similar opinion to myself. I mirror all of this, and I guess I'm glad I'm not the only one who doesn't fully connect with this area. But this is a community ranking, and we have a ton of fabulous comments praising the research hall, so I've picked out one voter who really wanted to talk about it positively. I gotta say, Bloodborne's research hall might actually be my favourite area in the whole game. Not only is the aesthetic unique and great at storytelling, the level design of this place is just a treat to go through. The amount of rooms, staircases, and things to find that can all be switched around by using the top lever makes this place 10 times more fun to explore than it looks. The enemies in here aren't super developed, but they're not annoying at all, and are super important to the disturbing lore of the research hall. There are even traps splattered across the halls, and a side quest involving collecting brain fluid to distribute to a crazed up patient. Yeah, this area has surprisingly a lot to offer, whether it's in the gameplay or story department. The only thing I dislike about it is the boss, Living Failures, which I actually hate a lot more than most others, but that's another point. The research hall is always the main thing I look forward to when I replay the DLC. It's not even the bosses. Okay, well, maybe it is the bosses, but still, the fact this place is so Bloodborne-y and so unique at the same time makes it that much more appealing to me. I didn't even remember the trapped bookcases until reading this comment, but you're so right. We have a little Sen's Fortress action in here. And you're also right that it's one of the most thematically fleshed out zones in Bloodborne, with every enemy in every room telling a morbid tale of what the Healing Church was truly up to. Well deserving of a high spot on today's list, as we should expect from a DLC zone. At number 4, we have the Nightmare of Mensis, which scored a total difficulty average of 7.4 out of 10, with no votes for easiest area and 8 votes for hardest area, while quality-wise it lands in 10th place with a total score of 6.12, with 4 votes for favourite area and 9 votes for least favourite. The Nightmare of Mensis is the final base game area of Bloodborne, featuring a vast structure that you have to climb in order to find and defeat Baby Murgo. You start outside, dealing with Loran's silver beasts, wriggling white worms, and the most infamous part of this level, the Brain of Mensis. This is a towering creature that watches the land around the nightmare, cursing those who it sees with frenzy. So you have to hide behind structures and rush your way through to the double doors of the castle before you succumb. And a lot of new players don't enjoy this mechanic, nor do the veteran players. It just isn't fleshed out enough for me. Then you have the room with the giant spiders, which would raise the difficulty to a 10 for me because I find it difficult to even look at that room with my arachnophobia. Ugh. Then we have the hunter on the bridge, who's decently strong, and a room filled with Murgo's attendants, who can be surprisingly tanky, before we reach Mikolash and the halfway point. In the second half, we climb up the circular Murgo's loft, avoiding pigs and shadows of Yharnam, which I admittedly find pretty easy myself. Where this level veers into difficulty is likely the Winter Lantern Bridge you need to take if you want to yeet the brain into the abyss. It's a large bridge with stone structures throughout, and you either have to stealth past the Winter Lanterns or just fight your way through, and it's caused a lot of deaths. Not the bridge itself, but getting off the elevator to even reach it, that's where the death count comes in. I really need to see how the voters talk about this level, because if I had my way, I think the research hall would be above the Nightmare of Mensis, but that's just me personally. Voters? Even after years of playing this game, Nightmare of Mensis still stands as one of my toughest to get through. First, you're hit with Frenzy from the Eye of Mensis, and God help if you were playing online and get invaded. The beasts are aggressive, and giants can one-shot you with boulders if you stop at any point, which you'll have to if you want those precious bloodstone chunks. Then you have the spider, the hunter, I could go on. It's a brutal endgame area, not to mention they fused the two worst enemies together with crows and dogs. People talk about the poison level of the nightmare, but I honestly prefer it. Yeah, Miyazaki loves his poison, but I feel Mensis throws a lot more at the player. Finding the secret with the eye and the blood rock is fun though, and the path before the wet nurse is great for farming echoes outside of the Kumfupk chalice. But in the end, Mensis stands as my most difficult area besides the defiled chalice. Also, love what you do, Billy. Keep up the good work, my man. Thank you so much. Interesting. I did forget about the giants in this zone, since I tend to just sprint through without thinking, but you are so right. Leading up to the double doors, you can get rock sniped, and playing online is something I also don't think about, as I usually play offline, but again, it's a nightmare area, you can get invaded here, and that just fucking sucks. Whoever thought an invasion in an area where the player is taking constant frenzy damage was a good idea? We need to have a talk, that's so unhinged. Mensis certainly throws more at the player than the Nightmare Frontier, which is why it ultimately ranks higher in difficulty, but I prefer what Mensis is selling compared to the Nightmare Frontier. It feels a bit more original. At number 3, we have Yahar'gul Unseen Village, which scored a total difficulty average of 7.51 out of 10, with no votes for easiest area and 12 votes for hardest area. While in the quality trenches, it sits in 11th place with a score of 6.06, with 1 vote for favourite area and 13 votes for least favourite area. The moment where Bloodborne goes full cosmic horror and the amygdalas are revealed is one I won't soon forget. But putting us through Yahar'gul moments later is a cruel joke, developers. The first half of this area has a rather annoying gimmick, this being that enemies can respawn as you need to kill the various bell-ringing women to remove their buffs and make them permanently killable. So your first runs will be less about making progress and more about learning the locations of the maidens to make running to them a lot easier. You also have amygdalas shooting eye lasers up thin stairways and courtyards in an attempt to blow up the player, which I also find very difficult to avoid. Then, in the Hypogean jail area, we have 3 hunters waiting to gank us for all we're worth, being one of the toughest encounters in the game for me. I always have to cheese them by leading them through small doorways and back the way I came. Survive that and you have cramped caskets in the street who are able to jump scare you and absolutely wreck you at the same time. I cannot let my guard down around these guys because they will find a way to kill me. Shortcuts are very rare in Yahar'gul, with you needing to do a lot of progress before finding the elevator that leads back to the area's first lamp, and even then, there's a hidden teleport fountain that you can use to get closer to the boss arena that just makes no sense whatsoever in context. Yahar'gul is one of the best areas for the lore and the atmosphere, but by god do I dread it on every playthrough because there is more enemy spam here than any other level in the game, and no matter how many beasts you kill, there's always something else that you missed getting ready to attack you. Absolutely brutal difficulty, and I'd argue it's actually my most difficult area in the game. As for my voters, well, I always find it pretty tricky to rank this kind of stuff. There's a lot of factors that come into play, but I decided to primarily base my rankings on my first ever couple of playthroughs, when you're the most unfamiliar with the games. I feel like that's when the difficulties in these games are the most organic, if you get what I mean. Yahar'gul was the one that kept coming up as the hardest for me. I remember struggling so much, especially the first half of the level, the respawning enemies gimmick, those damn bell maidens, the general confusing and dark layout, the amygdala staircase. But the absolute hardest part for me are those 3 hunter NPCs. Good lord, why are they so tough? It took me ages to get past them, and they still give me trouble today. I don't know if there's some secret trick to deal with them as I'm too stubborn to look up guides, etc. And the fact you have to run through the level again to have another go at them, brutal. It also took me ages to find out how you get to the upper cathedral key item in the last Bell Maiden. Again, I was too stubborn to look stuff up. The second half of the level isn't as hard for me, still tough, but more manageable. The one reborn isn't something to write home about either, but IMO as a complete package, it is the hardest level. The DLC areas are perhaps objectively harder, but I stand my ground on Yahar'gul. It's worth noting for the 3 hunters that you do get a lamp after the second amygdala staircase, which makes the run back to them way less painful, but you still have to kill a bell-ringing maiden and her entourage each time you retry, which can be a little irritating. It's that first half that really stands out difficulty-wise, as the game changes the rules from get through the level to find my maiden. And as we know from Elden Ring, gamers are maidenless. At number 2, we have the Hunter's Nightmare, which scored a total difficulty average of 8.13 out of 10, with no votes for easiest area and 22 votes for hardest area, while for quality it lands in 3rd place overall with a score of 8.25 out of 10, with 8 votes for favourite area and 1 vote for least favourite area. The Hunter's Nightmare is a complete recreation of the main part of Cathedral Ward and Central Yharnam, bastardized into this hunter's paradise, where you have all the beasts you could ever want to slay, all the blood you could ever need. It draws hunters in, cursing us all for Byrgenwerth's original sin. The first part in Cathedral Ward is tough, as you have to adapt to the new hunter enemies, as well as the squid giant thing that hangs out near the Grand Cathedral. These are tough opponents with movesets that put the base game enemies to shame, and really sets the tone for what's coming up. As Central Yharnam is now a battleground, and if you're not gunned down by machine guns or blown up with dynamite explosions, you'll likely get impaled by tough bloodlickers or the Gatling gun hunter and his blood-starved beast pet. What about the Beast Claw Hunter, where the Central Yharnam lamp should be, or the host of regular Yharnamites who swarm you as you progress with each well-timed sniper shot and melee swing? Later on, you find the area pre-Ludwig filled with those squid giants, and it becomes a case of choosing whether to fight or whether to just rush for the next lamp, or the boss himself. I really like having these split-second decisions. What's cool though is despite everything hitting harder and absolutely demanding you know how to play the game, you can come to the Hunter's Nightmare very early on in your playthrough after killing Amelia, which allows you to get some nice weapons and Bloodrock upgrades. So if you want to risk a higher difficulty, the reward is worth the gain. Ludwig is always a tough fight, and just beyond him we get a small portion of level featuring the Healing Church cells where Brador hangs out, as well as a battle with Vicar Amelia's human form and an attendant, which you do have to kill in order to access the elevator that leads to the research hall, as well as the way to obtain Lawrence's skull to access his boss fight back in the Grand Cathedral. Now, I know there is one voter who got the dissertation out for Hunter's Nightmare, so take it away. To this day, after dozens of playthroughs, the Hunter's Nightmare is the part that I look forward to the most. The amount of truly incredible encounters here has yet to be matched by From IMO, starting with the first old hunter, to the dregs trying to put up a fight against the Boomhammer hunter, then the encounter with the coolest looking enemy in the game, and watching 2 Yharnamites somehow managing to deal half his health, blocking the entrance to one of the most iconic visuals in Bloodborne, Lawrence laying in the cathedral like a horrific painting. What's insane to me is that the area keeps up this quality for another hour and still has a lot of encounters that are easily missable, like the Gatling Gun Hunter and Bloodstarved Beast. The shortcuts are also perfectly placed, with Simon, aka best NPC in the game, waiting for you at the lamp. Then you have the Blood Rivers, more of the big boys, but one is a cannon now, and you have the Living Corpse that saves you from ever having to farm blood vials again, and all that awaits you at the end is the best boss in the game and the Moonlight Greatsword to conclude the best intro area to a DLC From has ever done. You know what, you just reminded me about the infinite blood vial corpse. I think we should bump the difficulty down. Free blood? Illegal. Not in my Bloodborne. We farm Central Yharnam like men, and we like it. I can't even say that with a straight face. This voter makes it very clear Hunter's Nightmare is just filled with unique encounters and enemy setups that challenge you on everything you know. They had to make such a strong first impression, and there's a reason why the Old Hunters is still considered to be one of the best DLCs to any video game, period. But if we're looking for the hardest area, we have to go to the end of the DLC. At number 1, we have the Fishing Hamlet, which scored a total difficulty average of 9.04 out of 10, with 1 vote for easiest area, haha very funny, and 89 votes for hardest area. As for the quality ranking, it lands just below Central Yharnam in 2nd place, with a score of 8.55 out of 10, as well as 38 votes for favourite area and 4 votes for least favourite area. The Fishing Hamlet is the final location of Bloodborne's DLC, and it is a strikingly different experience compared to anything else in the game. Inspired by Lovecraft's The Shadow over Innsmouth, we fight through a village of fish creatures who simply want to protect what's left of their fallen god following the defilement of the Bergenworth scholars. Because the enemies are so different design-wise, they feel so fresh to fight, even the regular fishmen who have no right to be as interesting as they are. There are fish dogs, which is just a very cursed concept in general. You have certain fish witches who stay in one place, summoning dark spirits to attack the player, so you have to avoid them and approach quickly to stop the assault. There are lightning summoners who drop bolts of lightning on the player, which are often placed throughout the level to cause as much chaos as possible. You get invaded by Brador multiple times because he's offended that you can hear the calling of the bell. We have winter lanterns in the caverns because it wouldn't be a Bloodborne nightmare realm without at least one of those fuckers. The snail women have an entire cavern in the latter half of the village dedicated to them, even if they're pretty easy to get past. And most infamously, we have the shark giants. The ones outside, which you fight one by one, I can handle. In fact, the first one that appears is near a set of explosive pots that you can shoot as he passes by, and it will immediately kill him. But we're not here to talk about him. We're here to talk about the 2 in the fucking well, the ones guarding the Rakuyo. I have never fought them legit. I have always used the cheese method to take them out because, I'm sorry, fighting one of them is already hard enough, but 2 at the same time, for me, that's not very fun. They have such vast hitboxes on their attacks, and they're extremely aggressive. You could try the Shaman's Bone Blade to get them to turn on each other for a short while, but that requires a lot of setup to make it land. I struggled last time I played through the Hamlet because while it's not a long level by any means, it's very dense and very packed. That sequence outside following the first lamp with the electric summoners and the various fishmen and dogs got me killed more times than I care to admit. I can safely see why this area is considered the hardest in-game, but I also want my voters to explain it as well, and while I only have time to include one person, I think they speak for most. I want to talk about the Fishing Hamlet, the final area in the game and my personal favourite. The atmosphere for it can be described in one word: bleak. From the rainy climate to the dilapidated shacks covered in barnacles, corpses covered in slug parasites, the fishmen, villagers, and the gurgling sounds they make when struck down, all of it paints such a grim atmosphere, and I love it. I always have to stop and take it all in whenever I come here. I also really love the enemies in this area, but I want to highlight one in particular, the shark giants. Now hear me out, yes, they're hard, and a lot of people probably find them annoying for that reason, but that's specifically what I love about them. No matter what build I'm running or how many times I've played the game, these things always hand me my ass. The 2 giants in the well are honestly harder than most fights in the game. It takes a genuine effort to beat them, and it feels amazing every time. The variant with the anchor in particular has a slide attack followed by a 3-hit combo with a slight delay on the final swing, and it feels so good to dodge the whole thing perfectly. That, on top of a 10 out of 10 visual design and sound design, makes them my favourite non-boss enemy in the game, and it makes the fishing hamlet something I always look forward to whenever playing through the game again. Thank you for taking the time to read this, Billy. I know it's a lot, and I will be grateful if you choose to include any part of it in your video. I hope you and your partner are doing well. Smiley face. Well, thank you so much for the kind words. My partner and I are doing fabulous. Thank you for asking. I really wanted to include this comment because most of the Fishing Hamlet posts didn't talk about the sharks in a positive light, which would have just echoed my sentiments from earlier on. So I wanted someone who saw their difficulty as a pro, and I think it's a really cool perspective. The implication of this voter comment being that they got the Rakuyo legit, and I have the utmost respect for anyone who can manage that. If that person says this is the hardest area, I'm gonna believe it. Those are credentials. So Fishing Hamlet, congratulations. You are the hardest area in Bloodborne as voted for by my community, and their second favourite area in the game overall. And that's my list. Do you agree with my voters? Let me know down below, and be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all of my future videos. You can follow me over on Twitch or Blue Sky if you want to keep up with the channel. Otherwise, I want to give a shout out to my YouTube channel members for supporting me for another month. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much. You get a shout out in the description and at the end of videos as well, and sometimes you get special Let's Plays. It's a nice way of helping the channel. So I'll see you guys next time for another video. Adios.